Is naturalism irrational? William Lane Craig certainly seems to think so, but he's crazy and dishonest, but what else is new? Can he make a case that naturalism is its own worst enemy? Not if he has to talk to any actual scientists, he can't, which, of course, he never does. So it's off to the psych ward we go. This ought to be interesting. Today, we're going to tackle William Lane Craig once again, and as people know, I really have very little respect for the man, or for any religious apologist really, but Craig ought to know better than to do the things that he does regularly, and he just doesn't. He just doesn't. So we're going to see part of a Zoom call on naturalism, or at least Craig's strawman version of naturalism, because honesty isn't a part of his playbook. And exactly who is surprised by that? I love how he always has to throw his own name onto a video supposedly about C.S. Lewis and Alvin Plantiga. Talk about arrogant, but that's what he is. It's not William Lane Craig talks about yada yada yada. It's just plugged in there at the end like it belongs there in the first place. Come on, you get your own logo immediately following. Why do you need to throw your name down as an afterthought so nobody forgets it's all about you? Because the religious tend to be egotistical fools. But anyway, let's see where this goes.
Lewis's argument has been defended with great sophistication by the philosopher Alvin Plantiga, who argues that if you believe that naturalism and evolution are true, then you have a defeater or something that undermines any of your beliefs. Because if naturalism and evolution are true, then our beliefs have been selected not for truth, but for their survival value.
But that's not how everything works. This is common among the religious, who tend to see everything in black and white. But evolution doesn't define absolutely everything that occurs. Craig, as is no surprise, is a complete idiot. If I like vanilla ice cream more than strawberry ice cream, there is no survival advantage in that whatsoever. I just like what I like. Craig and those like him, they are completely ignorant of reality, and when they say stupid crap like that, it just proves it to the world. You have to remember that they've got a goal in mind, and that is to either build up their own irrational beliefs or to tear down the straw men that they have in their heads about their opposition. This is never about finding truth. It is about finding comfort. Keep that in mind as we move forward.
And it's perfectly possible for our beliefs to be false, but nevertheless to be conducive to the survival of our species.
Like, say, religion. Because religion, at least in the past, has been useful to survival. Not so much today, where it's actually holding us back, and that was even true to some degree in the past, but it's funny that he says that with a straight face, and the thought never occurs to him that maybe it's his beliefs that are false. Because no, of course that can't be the case. Evolution and methodological naturalism are both objectively defensible, rational, and intellectually derived, based on the evidence that we have at hand. Nothing in Dr. Craig's playbook can be described that way. He believes because it makes him feel good, not because there's any evidence whatsoever leading to the demonstrable validity of his faith. Because if you had any of that, you wouldn't need faith, would you?
And so on naturalism and evolution, you have this built-in defeater of the reliability of your cognitive faculties in any of your beliefs.
Except you don't. The only thing that is defeated here is theological thought. And I use that word pretty loosely. Because for people like Craig here, they are talking to an audience of their followers, and they're trying to convince their followers that their beliefs are true without really caring if any of it is true in the first place. This is the difference between an intellectual approach and an emotional one. He doesn't care if anything that comes out of his mouth is demonstrably so. What difference does that make? He's running a con job. There's a huge difference between an educator and an apologist, and William Lane Craig is definitely an apologist. He isn't concerned if what he believes is true. He just wants it to be true. And who gives a crap if it actually is?
Now, the paradox then is that the naturalist would have a defeater for his belief in naturalism, because naturalism is itself a belief formed by those very cognitive faculties.
First off, it's not a belief, not in the sense that Craig is pretending that it is. It is a position arrived at through a careful examination of the evidence that we have at hand. Unlike what Craig believes, which is just an emotional reaction borne out by nothing but his own wishful thinking. Craig clearly doesn't understand the difference, and his use of the term defeater is fallacious on its own, because he's only speaking of his own straw man version, his own misunderstanding of the positions. These defeaters are, in and of themselves, straw men on their own. He's not defeating the actual argument. He's defeating his own blatantly untrue misunderstanding of it. Craig is very good at logical fallacies. Virtually everything he says is covered in them.
And so naturalism is self-defeating. It cannot be rationally affirmed.
Actual naturalism can be. Your own ignorant version of it might not be able to, but this is why you talk to your ignorant followers and not actual capable scientists, because they'd rip them apart in a second. It's why the religious act the way that they do. They pick audiences from groups most likely to believe what they're already saying and never stray from that. Whereas skeptics like myself, we just make videos, and whoever wants to watch them, that's fine. I openly invite the religious to respond so we can have an open, intelligent, and rational discussion. And I've said that many, many times. But Craig, he only wants to cater to his target demographic. You know, the people who give him money and buy into his nonsense.
Now, this is not an argument that naturalism is false. Maybe naturalism is true, but it's an argument showing that belief in naturalism is irrational. It is impossible to rationally believe in naturalism, because if naturalism is true, you have a defeater for all of your beliefs, including the belief in naturalism.
Yet, naturalism isn't a belief, it's a conclusion based upon the evidence. Here too, we see Craig pretending that everyone is just like he is. We don't have a belief in naturalism any more than I have a belief that the sun will come up tomorrow morning. There is no faith involved whatsoever. It isn't necessary. I can look at decade after decade of the sun coming up and rationally predict that it will do so again tomorrow. Is that guaranteed? No. But given the statistical probability that I've determined, the chances that it will far outweigh the chances that it will not. In fact, I can't point to a single instance where it's ever behaved any other way. And for science, it works the same way. We have never seen a single case of anything that is not demonstrably natural. Not once, not ever. It's why we accept the natural world, because the natural world demonstrably exists. You know what doesn't demonstrably exist? Anything credibly defined as supernatural. The religious can't even define what that means. What constitutes the supernatural? What is it made of, and how do you know? Because the religious cannot point to a single demonstrable example of the supernatural. Why? Because it's all just made up. Go ahead, prove me wrong.
And I think that is a very powerful argument.
A very powerful argument that you're a dishonest idiot? Yes, I will agree with you there. Because you're not describing naturalism. You're describing your own straw man version, and that doesn't mean a thing. It doesn't get you anywhere, which is why you refuse to talk to people who know better than you do. And I'm really starting to suspect that includes pretty much everyone beyond the religious world. He's king crazy, leading all the other inmates and pretending that makes him important. No, it just makes him delusional. And that's hardly a surprise.
I recently reread Lewis's book Miracles, where he first set out that argument, which then obviously Plantiga went on to develop as the evolutionary argument against naturalism. And I was just stunned, sort of coming back to it. I read it really in my student days. I realized he's addressing all of the exact same questions that we're still addressing today when it comes to naturalism. He'd anticipated every one of them.
And welcome Justin Brierly to the studio. Justin, for those who don't know, runs the apologetic debate show Unbelievable, and I really don't have the slightest bit of respect for him whatsoever. Not that that means anything, but I'm just putting it out there. Because Justin, like most apologists, really has a poor understanding of, well, just about anything outside of his own blind faith. And that's why the religious are so easy to take apart, because once you dispose of their emotion-laden irrationality and focus only on the evidence, they've got absolutely nothing. And while I don't think Justin is quite as bad as Craig and Turek and all the rest of those idiots, I think he's got a lot of problems. But anyway, keep going. Sudden Justin is just sudden.
And yes, he was very prescient, wasn't he? Lewis was. He talked about the moral argument for God's existence and talked about the advent of postmodernism and the denial of the objectivity of truth and rationality.
All of which are just as bad arguments today as they were back in his day. Of course, you're talking about people who are just as delusional as C.S. Lewis once was, so that's hardly a surprise. Their arguments haven't significantly changed in centuries. Everything they say has been soundly debunked and is based on wishful thinking and not demonstrable fact, and yet they're still blathering on and on and on about things that have had absolutely no validity since the day they were first proposed. And here we go, with everyone just patting each other on the back for never evolving past the early days of theological discourse. They're proud of not getting better. Science improves daily. Religion changes never. Why is that exactly?
He was a far-sighted man in that he understood the direction of culture and where things were moving.
Yeah, sorry, give me someone like Isaac Asimov any day. At least the things he comes up with were real, or at least people who read his books thought that they were pretty good ideas and turned them into reality. Lewis really has nothing to show for his beliefs. Sure, he wrote a couple of books over and over and over because, let's be honest, most of his writings are just the same old tired nonsense restated in different ways, but none of it translated into objective reality. And now, decades later, Craig and Brierly are just giving him a hand job to keep his memory alive. Sorry, it just doesn't impress me. But nothing about William Lane Craig does. Going back to the beginning of the video where I mentioned that he put his own name on the title card, it seems to me that this entire talk was mislabeled. It should have been William Lane Craig and Justin Brierly theologically masturbate over C.S. Lewis. After all, he only mentions Alvin Plantiga once in passing, And mostly, he's just talking about his own ideas that he borrowed from Lewis before they decide they'd better steal a little bit of Lewis's thunder in the end by praising him. I really don't care where you get your ideas. I care about the quality of the ideas that you have, and Craig's are generally awful. But this is about feelings and has never been about facts, which is why they all use logical fallacies so often, because they've really got nothing else to say. They can't accurately criticize methodological naturalism for what it actually is, so they have to build a false version so they can tear it down again, because they've got nothing else intelligent to say. And where is the surprise in that?
Boom, dicky, 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 boom.